There is a lot of talk about the inequality of wealth in the U.S. at this time, and whether or not the imbalance should be adjusted. Obviously, those with great wealth, together with their paid endorsers, are very much against any change and accuse those who are looking for change of trying to equalize everyone when nature itself doesn't show much in the way of equality. It's true that nature shows considerable variation within species when it comes to size, strength, intelligence, etc. But such variation almost always comes in the form of what's known as a normal distribution, usually referred to as a bell curve. Most are grouped pretty much in the middle, and only a few are at either extreme. The current distribution of wealth, and thus political and social power in the U.S., is hardly even remotely in the shape of a bell curve. Instead, we have what is called an L curve, with a tiny minority having wealth way beyond what they would have if the distribution were normal. Since many advocates of such concentration of wealth and power attribute it to quasi-forces of nature, such as Darwinian natural selection or invisible hands, it is significant to note what nature does on its own. While some no doubt do work harder and are more intelligent than others, it seems very unlikely that the range between the left part of the curve and the right part would be on the order of millions of magnitudes. As one goes from the norm, which is most of the group, to the extremes in either direction, the numbers thin out, and the smaller and smaller groups are said to be 1, 2, or 3 deviations from the norm. For example, at one extreme could be a very short person, say 2 feet tall, and at the other, a very tall person, say 9 feet tall. Even so, their departure from the norm is hardly on the order of 1,000,000 or billion times. The fairest way to figure out what the distribution ought to be is to calculate the value of the planet before any of us now alive were here. If you went back 100 years, the value of the buildings, artifacts, land, resources, etc. would be quite a sum, and it would represent value not created by any person now alive. Thus, one could argue that it should be seen as a common inheritance and not wealth that should have been arbitrarily allocated to a privileged few because of the accident of their birth. After all, no one chooses his or her parents. If this were done, then everyone on the planet would be entitled to, at a minimum, 3 hots and a cot. That is to say, they could be provided with food, a place to stay, maybe nothing fancy, but usable, education and health care up to the age of 18. If the education were what it could be, then all these people would be able to contribute back to society the cost of what should have been, in the first place, their fair share of the common inheritance, thus making it available to the next generation.